So I've made it. You've made it. We've made it. We've made it to the final episode of My Life with Baseball Cards, at least the 2020 edition. But there's still so many questions left, such as, what in God's name caused me to make these videos to begin with? There's a few answers to that question. One, I got a new computer, pretty powerful. It gave me a chance to justify getting that computer by practicing my video editing instead of just using it to render board games online and do music stuff. So that's one answer. The second is, this is something I wanted to do for quite a while, curate the baseball card collection. One, because someone's going to wind up with these things after I'm done with them, after I die, or it's a way to curate the collection. So let's say, for example, baseball cards are like an art. In my era, or art collecting rather, so like era 3 especially, trying to find these old cards from various pre-Topps places, to just have them in a pile in a cabinet somewhere doesn't make any sense to someone who's just coming in and say, hey, let me see your baseball cards. Well, yep, there's a pile in the Horkendorf, just go ahead and look at them. That's not very interesting, so I'm trying to make that interesting. And this has been on my post-retirement list for quite a while. I retired a little over a year ago. I'm getting to this now. So the curation part is, well, you've seen how it's turned out to this point. I've gone other ways with this before, and it just wasn't very successful. Loving baseball cards. I've had baseball in general. I used to have albums of pages of cards, and it's just, even for me, my eyes just glazed over if it's just not organized in some way that's concise. And one way to do that is with the clubs that I've been able to do in some of the previous episodes, to make it kind of a, hey, here's some really important players and their cards. Now, there's still things you can do, like, hey, I'm a Braves fan or I'm a Pirates fan. What have you got there? For Braves and Cubs specifically, I have my little specific hope chest for the Braves. There's the Braves logo there, little Braves jersey on the top. A lot of my favorite Braves are in here. Now, I don't have one of these for every team. I just have one for the Braves and the Cubs. But if, for example, you're a Pirates fan and you just want to look at the Pirates, then we would dig through season by season, perhaps, and look at those. A little less, ready for you, but doable. Anyway, that's part of the curation part, is to make the cards a little bit more accessible to someone who wants to look at cards, which doesn't happen too often, but sometimes it happens, and it kind of, I don't know, here's some cards, kind of ruins the fun of that question, or answering that question. But there's a lot of players that we haven't talked about. I mean, there's some big names that have not been on those clubs that we've talked about. And I thought about adding some other stuff like honorable mentions. So, for example, Lou Gehrig was very, very close to 500 home runs when he was forced to leave baseball because of the illness he contracted. Now, he's not just famous because of the illness he contracted. He was a dominant baseball player. As Babe Ruth's teammate, and then after Babe retired, he was carrying the Yankees for many years during, one of many dynasties that the Yankees had. If he would have had his worst season that last season, he would have easily been in the 500 home run club. So I thought about doing like an honorable mentions of, hey, Lou Gehrig was almost there. Bob Feller was almost in the 300 win club, and he would have been, because he was out of baseball for 3 seasons for military service, he would have easily, with his worst seasons, or average seasons at least, been in the 300 home run club. But that seemed kind of like kind of a mulligan. I didn't really like that. So I'm still trying to figure out how to curate some of these other very important players that I like very much into the collection. And obviously they're in the collection, but into the display of the collection. So, for instance, there's George Sisler. He hasn't been in this list yet. This is a pretty beat up George Sisler card, but I like it. It's gorgeous George here while he's on the St. Louis Browns. What's so great about George Sisler? Well, he actually held the hits in a season record, batted .400 that year, by the way, 257 hits. That record stood for over 80 years until Ichiro Suzuki beat it. He was just an impressive guy. So then I thought, well, maybe the 400 hitters. Well, that didn't really feel right either. That's kind of a peak season, but it's a pretty important peak season. Then I thought, hey, what about Triple Crown winners? And I thought, well, that's kind of neat. And 400 hitter, I don't know when we're going to have another 400 hitter. It hasn't happened since the 50s. And it hasn't happened in the National League since the 30s, I think. So that club seems to be kind of closed. Triple Crown has happened not long ago. It's still pretty rare. So I thought, well, maybe I go this way. Now, this is a work in progress. So, I don't know. This may work, this may not. But let's run through that real quick. So, in order of the first Triple Crown that they gained, we have Napoleon Lajoie. So we talked about him. He's in the 3,000 hit club. Here's his tobacco card. Now, just for fun, since this is a tobacco card and it's not really a picture, I figured I'm going to need some placeholders in here anyway. Here's Napoleon Lajoie placeholder with a picture. I kind of like this. Again, this is the Conlon collection. Next was Ty Cobb. I'm not going to show you my Tom Barker game card yet again. I'll show you another placeholder with a nice picture, a real picture of Ty Cobb. It's pretty cool. Then one of the things that's good about the Triple Crown thing is it puts a little more life in this for me, because there's guys in here I don't know anything about. I never heard about him until I started doing the research for this very episode. Heine Zimmerman. Never heard of him. He is a Triple Crown winner from the Cubs in 1912. I'm going to have to learn more about this guy, and let's hope I can find a baseball card of him. Rogers Hornsby. One of my first exhibit cards. Not the first exhibits card, but one of my first exhibit cards. Love this guy. Hit, like I said before, hit 400 multiple times. He was amazing. Next, Jimmy Fox. We've talked about him multiple times. Here is a placeholder card with a picture of him, so I stop boring you with my exhibits card of him. Next is another guy I haven't heard of before. I'm going to have to learn more about. Chuck Klein. Got the Triple Crown in 1933. Know nothing about him. That'll be work for the next mini-series of My Life with Baseball Cards. Then comes Lou Gehrig. So here's my real Lou Gehrig card, W517. Now this leads me to the grading conversation. So you may have noticed some of these things are in these hard plastic things. They don't open unless you force them open. And there's a few notable graders of cards. There's Beckett, there's PSA. PSA is probably the most famous authenticator in the business. But if you look at this, up in the upper right is the condition of the card. The better the condition, the more, well, typically the more valuable the card is. I'm not big on condition. For me, it's more the look of the card. So a lot of times, the corners of the card, if they're beat up, that's going to drop the condition a lot. I'm okay with the corners being beat up if the picture of the card itself looks good. So sometimes I will be happy with a PSA 4, for example, from a 50s card, where the picture just looks great, versus a PSA 8, which is like pristine, looks brand new, but the picture, the coloring's not quite right or whatever. The authenticators don't really care much about that. They care about how new or new condition it looks, even if the printing quality is kind of less. Totally objective rather than subjective. But anyway, a little bit on grading. My Lou Gehrig card, another thing they can do instead of grading it, they'll just verify that it's authentic. In this case, this is not even graded. It's just verified as authentic, which I'm good with. I have an authentic Lou Gehrig card. Okay, next on the list, I've heard of this guy. I don't know a lot about him, but I do know he's part of the Gas House Gang. Joe Ducky Medwick. He won a Triple Crown. Next that I totally knew, Ted Williams. Talked a little bit about Ted Williams. He went back to be a fighter pilot twice in the war. Just an amazing hitter. Next is my Mickey Mantle card from 56. We talked about the UFO watchers on this card, so I'll just bring it up again. Grading again, so the Ted Williams card here is a very good 4. And I just think the coloring on this card is perfect. I guess there's a little bit of dinging on the corners that you have to look really hard for. I'm okay with that. I don't need an 8 or 9. Mickey Mantle, this is a 30, good. The corners are definitely rounded on this, but it's a good colored card. All right, next on the Triple Crown list is Frank Robinson. This is actually his SSPC card when he became a Cleveland Indian. And his deal to go with the Cleveland Indians is, he said, I'll go there if you make me the manager. So this was the first player manager in my baseball consciousness in 75. So Frank Robinson, also the first African-American manager in baseball. The next Triple Crown winner, Carl Yastrzemski. I gave you a pretty long description of Carl in the 3,000 Hit Club. So there's Carl. And then the first, because that was before my baseball consciousness, the first Triple Crown in my baseball consciousness was in 2012. Miguel Cabrera did it. I like me some Miguel Cabrera. Here's a nice card of Miguel. So the game that I was telling you about that we went to with the boys in Pittsburgh where the Tigers were in town, Miggy was playing third. And the funnest part of this game, other than Verlander just pitching a fantastic game, here's Miguel early in his career with the Marlins. Someone tossed a ball to the umpire between innings, and the umpire just dropped it, and whatever. It was no big deal. No one was really paying much attention, but Miguel was. And he was standing right by the umpire, and he booed the umpire. He just stood next to the umpire and booed him for dropping the ball until the inning started. He was laughing at him. It was a lot of fun. That is Miguel Cabrera. Anyway, so there's Triple Crown batting winners, and how I may or may not curate them in the future. So before I go on talking about curating a little bit, let me finish the answer to the question, which was, why in the world am I doing this? The other reason is it's 2020. We are under a coronavirus quarantine, and I thought this video might be interesting for people to watch because they're stuck not doing stuff. Actual baseball is not happening, even though it's almost Memorial Day here in 2020. So you're welcome, I guess. I've been sticking these on YouTube, and people are actually watching them, which still stuns me. So thank you for watching it. It makes me feel like what I'm doing isn't a complete waste of time. So thanks for that. So Triple Crown. Now, all the things I just showed you were Triple Crown batting winners, which is a much more famous and talked about Triple Crown. There's also a Triple Crown of pitchers, which is much less talked about. For the hitters, it's batting average, home runs, and RBIs. Now, I know there's statistical talk about there's more accurate statistics now than batting average. Technically true. There's more interesting statistics than wins. Yeah, technically true as well, sort of. There's the wins above replacement. Totally on board with that. Makes more sense from evaluating a player. But WAR is calculated differently depending on who you talk to. And it's really hard in day-to-day. A guy hits a single. It's like, his average went up. He has one more hit. He has one more single. You have no idea what that did to his WAR while the game is going on. So while WAR and other advanced statistics definitely have their place and are totally accurate, as a ball game's actually happening, not as useful. So the old statistics are still significant in my mind. Anyway, batters, Triple Crown is batting average, home runs, and RBIs. Pitchers, it's wins, strikeouts, and ERA. Oddly enough, even though hitters don't get the Triple Crown very often, since the 2000s and within the last 15 years especially, there's been a lot of Triple Crowns, which is odd, interesting, and kind of exciting. But I'll run through these pretty quick. So we've got Cy Young. He won the first Triple Crown ever, not surprisingly. Next is Christy Mathewson. I'm going to show you his placeholder card because, well, just to have something different for you to look at. I believe Mark Harmon plays Christy Mathewson in the early 1900s. I'm not sure how he managed that, but he did. All right, now I have a real placeholder card. The next Triple Crown winner in order is Rube Waddell. Here is my Basil collection card of him. I have nothing on Rube Waddell. I know who he is. I know what he looks like. He is featured on the Ken Burns series, but I have nothing of Rube Waddell in terms of baseball cards. Walter Johnson won multiple Triple Crowns as well. This is a cool picture of him, and my exhibits card is pretty neat too, which I showed you earlier. If you see the Ken Burns series, which I highly recommend, by the way, you see his pitching action was unique. It was kind of sidearm. This kind of shows it, as does his exhibits card. Kind of neat. Grover Cleveland Alexander won the Triple Crown. He won it a lot, actually. So you may not be as familiar with Grover Cleveland Alexander, but he was a pretty darn good pitcher. Now we hit some of the guys I don't really know much about, if anything. We've got Hippo Vaughn. I've heard of him. Don't know a lot about him, other than now he won a Triple Crown. Dazzy Vance, heard the name. He's a Triple Crown winner. Lefty Grove, I showed you my exhibits card from him when he was in the 300 Wins Club. There you go, Lefty Grove. A better picture of him, honestly, than my exhibits card. And then, I guess, just to continue the lefty name going, Lefty Gomez won the Triple Crown, I think, a couple times. Here's a guy I've never, ever heard of in any context at all, but he won a Triple Crown, so I guess I should know something about him. Bucky Walters. Old Cincinnati Red. Who knew? Then, part of the reason for going to the Triple Crown, this is a reason for me to show off my 1956 Bob Feller card. He had a fastball at that time that had been unheard of, other than Walter Johnson, I think. So, Bob Feller, like that guy. Hal Newhouser is next. He won a Triple Crown. And then my excuse to show off my Sandy Koufax 1956 card. Now, I thought about doing a 3 no-hitter club, which is only, I think, 5 guys. You know, Sandy would be in that, Bob Feller would be in that. And it seemed a little forced. So I'm going to, right now I'm thinking Triple Crown. Steve Carlton won the Triple Crown in that 1972 season I talked about before, when he won almost half of the Phillies games in 72. Dwight Gooden was a phenomenon when he first came up. He won a Triple Crown. Roger Clemens, I believe, has won multiple Triple Crowns. Now, this is a good way to get Pedro Martinez in as well. I got an old Expo card of him here. Most people think of him as a Red Sox, but yeah, I like this card. When he was young, coming up. Here's Randy Johnson. He also won a Triple Crown. Then, we've got kind of a plethora of them here since 2010. We have Johan Santana, the Twins. Jake Peavy with the Padres. That came out of left field for me. I did not know he won a Triple Crown. And then a little less surprising, Clayton Kershaw. By the way, if you look really closely, I think I have his bobblehead up there. He's between the 2 Twins bobbleheads up there. Probably can't make them out. And Justin Verlander. So there's your pitching Triple Crown winners. So now how about some more questions? So should I just do the Triple Crown winners, or should I go back to my original idea of 400 hitters? If I do 400 hitters, then Lou Gehrig's not in it. Maybe it's not an either or. Maybe I should do the 400 hitters, which would include George Sisler. It would also include shoeless Joe Jackson. Here's a placeholder for Joe. Now, think about Joe, also lifetime ban for gambling and baseball, by the way. It's a really hard card to get. So Babe Ruth actually said he modeled his swing after Joe Jackson. I don't know. Should I do that? Do all the 400 hitters? That could work. I have more questions here. Maybe not as many answers as there are questions. Then there's some of the great players that aren't in the Hall of Fame. I've got Mordecai Three Finger Brown, his tobacco card here. He was a big deal of a pitcher, but didn't hit any of the clubs. There's Joe DiMaggio. Almost everyone's heard of Joe DiMaggio. I don't feel like I can have a club of all the guys who have the record for longest hitting streak. That would always be a club of one. Just the same as a club of guys who broke the color barrier. That would continue to be a club of one, and it's probably not going to change. This is a really good card. Then it's like, well, the Brooklyn Dodgers are kind of cool, and there were some really good players on them. Roy Campanella was a big deal. Duke Snider was a big deal for the Dodgers. Then there's, former MVPs. There's Yogi Berra, who I've always been a big fan of. Here's his 56. Whitey Ford, Hall of Fame pitcher. Then the Hall of Fame is like, wow, there's a lot in the Hall of Fame. And I got to tell you, your eyes glaze over when you go to the Hall of Fame. You see all these players. I don't know that I want all of the Hall of Fame players like in a pile. It's very overwhelming. Say then you get to Robin Roberts. Watch some story or read some stories on him. He was almost pretty much the Greg Maddux of his time. He just didn't get to the milestones that he did. I don't know. I don't know how I get this all curated as nicely and neatly. Then there's just great cards. Here's a 73 Johnny Bench. I love this in-action shot of him. And it's just a really cool card. Here's a cool Brooks Robinson, one of the greatest fielders, perhaps the greatest third baseman of all time. But this card always kind of cracked me up. He had that itty-bitty visor on his helmet. I think he's the only guy who ever did that. I'm not sure why he did that. Kind of stood out. And then, of course, there's fielders. Fielding, it's a joy to watch fielding. Fantastic plays. It's something a lot of other sports, you just don't have that. You have, a particular thing that you do on offense and defense isn't as interesting. But there's no stats, even in baseball, that really express defense. Of course, Ozzie Smith. It was pretty much in the Hall of Fame because he was a great shortstop. To me, Andrelton Simmons, very hard to say, may be the best shortstop I've ever seen. I only saw Ozzie a little bit. Simmons is pretty fantastic. Ivan Rodriguez, a great card of him here. But, it just gets to be in a pile. He and Carlton Fisk, probably the two best defensive catchers ever. What do I do about their cards? Or do they just not get in, the view because they're not part of these clubs? I don't know. Then there's cards that are just fun for cards' sake. There's the Brian Hunter card of, celebrating his great base stealing season. Cool card. There's, Mike Benjamin, his Heritage uniform with a Heritage glove. Like, am I supposed to catch a ball with this? Brian Jordan, 2 Sports Star. Yeah. Got some 2 Sports going on there. Kirby Puckett with his great big bat. Kind of fun. I don't know. The novelty stuff, I don't know. Just kind of have on the side, I guess. One other cool thing is, for years, I lived in Hickory, and there's no baseball, Major League Baseball in Hickory, but while we were living there, Hickory got a minor league franchise, and they actually became the poster child during the '94 strike of baseball. Minor league baseball was still happening. So the Sporting News actually had a cover about minor league baseball, and the Hickory Crawdads made the cover of the Sporting News. Pretty interesting. Anyway, as we went to those games, you couldn't help, or at least I couldn't help but wonder, am I ever going to see these guys in the majors? For the most part, no. The two names I remember hearing a lot, and apparently we went to a lot of Phillies games because he didn't play against the Crawdads, Scott Rowland, multiple-time Gold Glove winner in the major leagues for the Phillies. Also, Meglio Ordonez played for the Crawdads. Heard his name a lot. Multiple-time All-Star on the White Sox. I have a Hickory Crawdad card of him. How's that for exciting? And then I just have, again, a novelty card. Before Michael Jordan retired from basketball to play baseball, he took batting practice with the White Sox. And they actually made a card of him being a White Sox. This is before anyone said, oh, he's going to play baseball now? That's kind of odd. So this curating stuff is both a blessing and a curse. It allows me to take those cards that I have and organize them in a way that it's interesting to look at them. But also it's a way for me to learn more about baseball and have more interesting, to me, stories so I can bore the heck out of everybody who brings up baseball around me. Hey, I didn't say it was a blessing and a curse for me, did I? So I'm going to wrap this up with some of the music you may have heard on one of the other episodes. This was the closing music for This Week in Baseball. So This Week in Baseball was a show that was on forever. It may still be on, for all I know, but for the longtime host of it was Mel Allen.
This is Mel Allen. Fasten your seatbelts, cause baseball is really flying. A Cincinnati departure is not delayed en route to a lofty altitude. A New York pilot gets his crew airborne with the help of some late arrivals. A San Diego jet revs up in the control tower and glides down the runway. 5 VIPs who always went first class soared to the highest plane. So let's wing it, y'all, on This Week in Baseball.
Oh yeah, that reminds me. Did you watch the Keith Olbermann tribute to Tony Gwynn? Well, if you haven't, I'm not going to tell you again. Really, I'm not going to tell you again. Go ahead and pause now and watch it if you want. I know, but for the longtime host of it was Mel Allen, the host of, or the broadcaster for the Yankees for a long, long time. The closing credits always got me. This was the closing credits for This Week in Baseball, and it's going to be the closing credits for My Life with Baseball Cards.